Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to let everyone join, and then we'll kick off this webinar, and I will introduce everyone on the webinar. I'll give it 30 seconds more. Okay, I think we'll make a start. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today to discuss InMed Pharmaceuticals and BayMedica. My name is Neil Shah, Content and Strategy Director at Edison Group, and I will be moderating this call today. On Monday, InMed announced a definitive agreement to acquire BayMedica, a transformational deal providing InMed the flexibility to use a range of different manufacturing methods to produce rare cannabinoids. Before we start, as a publicly listed company, it is important that investors take note of the forward-looking statements provided at the beginning of this presentation. Please note that all statements other than the statements of historical facts are a statement that could be deemed forward-looking statements. A complete discussion of the risks and uncertainties facing the company appear in the company's filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission and in the company's annual information form dated September 23rd, 2020, a copy of which is available on SEDAR at www.sedar.com. I'd also like to note that we are recording today's presentation. With me today from InMed, we have Eric Adams, Chief Executive Officer at InMed, Shane Johnson, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer at BayMedica, Bruce Colwell, Chief Financial Officer at InMed. Eric, Shane, and Bruce will be discussing InMed's recently announced acquisition of BayMedica, after which we will be hosting a Q&A session. A large number of questions were received ahead of today's presentation, which, together with any questions received throughout the call, we will do our best to address in today's 45-minute session. If you would like to submit a question at any point, please do so by using the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom application. And with that being said, I'll hand it over to you, Eric. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. As mentioned, on Monday, we announced a definitive agreement for InMed to acquire BayMedica. It's subject to standard closing conditions, which we're allowing ourselves a few weeks to complete. But we're very confident that we'll be able to do that, and we look forward to bringing the two companies together to build something that we think is really important in the space of rare cannabinoids. Just by way of background, I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about InMed, and then we'll let Shane talk a little bit about BayMedica. InMed is a cannabinoid pharmaceutical company, so we specialize in developing the cannabinoid class of compounds into pharmaceutical products to treat rare diseases. We've been around for about 6 years now. We've been focused exclusively on using rare cannabinoids, which include essentially all the cannabinoids outside of THC and CBD. So we do not use either of those. We never touch the plant. We have nothing at all to do with the cannabis plant. But what we do is we manufacture these in a setting that allows for very high quality, very high purity, and repeatability. We've developed a novel approach to manufacturing rare cannabinoids called IntegraSyn. We did so because we needed access to these compounds in order to research them and develop them into pharmaceutical products. We focused originally on dermatology and ocular diseases. We did that because, number one, there was a lot of anecdotal evidence about the potential for cannabinoids to treat diseases in this space, but also because we can apply them topically. We don't have to go into the central blood system, and you don't have to ingest these cannabinoids in order to be treated. You could put it directly onto the wounds or into the eye. So, and we'll show you a little bit later, but we have a very experienced team of pharmaceutical drug development executives, and we are listed on the NASDAQ under the symbol INM. So that's just a little bit of the flavor as to who we are. And Shane, maybe you could walk us through BayMedica.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So At BayMedica, we are also focused on rare cannabinoids. We leverage synthetic biology and chemical synthesis. So like InMed, don't touch the plant. And our focus has been on the manufacture of rare cannabinoids, targeting B2B sales in the health and wellness sector, as well as the manufacture or synthesis of novel cannabinoid analogs, which are optimally best suited for pharmaceutical research and development as new patentable compounds. We are a young company, but we launched our first product, CBC, at the very end of 2019. We've generated about over $2.5 million worth of revenue since then. So it's a small but steadily growing revenue stream for us. Our lead product, CBC, we believe a leader, if not the leader, in large batch production of CBC. We're currently at 200 kilo batch size and have the ability to bring that up to metric tons. So I think we've accomplished quite a bit there. I should note we are poised to launch some additional compounds into the B2B health and wellness sector here in the coming months and quarters.
Great. Thank you for that. So, what does this acquisition mean? I think importantly, it creates a market leader in the manufacturing of rare cannabinoids, and we'll talk quite a bit about that. There's no one size fits all approach to making this class of compounds, and so this is going to be very important, I think, for the two companies coming together and for the industry in general. For InMed, it creates a commercial opportunity, and pharmaceutical research is very well understood. It takes a very long time. It takes an enormous amount of money to develop products to be approved to treat diseases. So, on the one hand, you have this very long process, this very long timeline, very high costs. But the payoff is if you can bring a product to market that specifically brings benefit to patients in a way that they haven't been able to access before, then there's a very high commercial opportunity. So in the pharma sector, it's common to see products with several hundred million in sales, even billions in sales, and there's products now out there in the pharma sector that are generating revenues of $20 billion per year. So we don't think we're in that category, but we do think that if we're able to demonstrate really meaningful benefit, there's a significant commercial opportunity. But that's a long-term play. In the shorter term, you have someone like BayMedica, who's come up with very interesting novel approaches to manufacturing that now allows them to supply rare cannabinoids into the health and wellness space. And so that's more of a short-term benefit, and the revenues probably aren't going to be the same as what you'd see in pharmaceuticals, but they can be very attractive and with very high margins. Importantly, as Shane mentioned, BayMedica has developed a whole library of cannabinoid analogs, which are ideal for exploring pharmaceutical opportunities. So basically, you take the naturally occurring cannabinoid, you alter its structure slightly in one way or another to either increase its potential efficacy, to increase its safety, or to maybe change the way that you can administer it. So they have an entire library of that, and it fits very nicely into what we do at InMed, which is pharmaceutical drug research and development. So that's a very natural fit for the two companies to come together. And as you'll see, we'll talk more about the management teams, but it just brings a breadth and depth of expertise that really augments the people that we have in place at InMed. We can talk a little bit about the manufacturing, and as I mentioned, and this is kind of where Shane and I saw eye to eye very early on in our discussions, is that there's really no one manufacturing approach that fits all cannabinoids. There's different kinds of synthesis. There's the extraction, first of all, which works very well for the major cannabinoids, THC and CBD. You grow the plant, you extract the compounds from that. And it works ideally for those two, maybe one or two others. But of the other 100 cannabinoids that can be found in the plant, it's impractical because these products exist in such small quantities. So you have to turn to modern manufacturing techniques. typically what you see in the pharmaceutical space and in the health and wellness space as well are chemical synthesis as well as biosynthesis. Chemical synthesis is very straightforward. You start with different starting materials, you create chemical reactions, and you build the structures that you're interested in. Biosynthesis involves working with a microbe, either yeast or bacteria, and you genetically reprogram it so that it becomes a little factory for the compounds that you're looking for. There's a third way to do this, which is the IntegraSyn system, which is essentially a combination of those two. And really, what we do there is we make an enzyme that can then be used in a chemical synthesis type approach to manufacture. So again, it really depends on, number one, which cannabinoid you're trying to make. Number two, how much of it you want to make. Do you only need 1 kilogram, or do you need a metric ton? And three, what quality do you need to make it at? Because the quality specifications for a product that's being used in the health and wellness, which we would call food grade, is very different from what you would use in a pharmaceutical product, which we call pharmaceutical grade. The specifications are much different. The cost of making the pharma product is anywhere from 5 to 10 times higher, simply because of all of the quality control that you have to build into your system. So if you can answer those three things, which one, how much, and what quality, then you could probably select which one of these processes is going to be best to make your product effectively, high quality, and at a low cost. Emphasis on the low cost there. Shane, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great summary, Eric. I think one thing that I think is interesting to think about, and I like to mention, is, if one just thinks about the hemp or cannabis sativa plant for context, there are over 140 cannabinoids that have now been identified out of the plant. Only a small fraction of those, a minority, are actually made via a biological process or an enzymatic process, whereas the vast majority ultimately take those as starting points, and chemical reactions take place for degradation or conversion or what have you into other cannabinoids. So even in the plant, when we look at that as kind of a guidebook for some of these rare naturally occurring cannabinoids, we already have an example of multiple manufacturing approaches, if you will, taking place. And so ultimately, to be able to make all of these, not touching the plant, or to make them more efficiently, being able to leverage multiple approaches also makes a world of sense.
Absolutely. And so, as mentioned, the IntegraSyn is something that we've developed. It focused a little bit more on the pharmaceutical side of things, but may have applications in health and wellness. And what BayMedica brings to the table is extensive chemical synthesis expertise. And we both have various degrees of biosynthesis capabilities. But as you'll see, the team members at BayMedica, were around from day one in the biosynthesis field, and actually wrote some of the textbooks on it. So quite an extensive experience and know-how there. So again, it's kind of the manufacturing where we see a really strong overlap between the two companies. And on the InMed side, we'll continue to focus on the pharmaceutical applications, drug development, clinical trials, regulatory, et cetera, et cetera. We currently have one program to treat a rare genetic skin disorder called epidermolysis bullosa, going into phase 2 trials in Europe, and we're expected to start enrolling patients in the coming weeks. So that's pretty advanced. The glaucoma program that we have for ocular disease, that's probably going to enroll patients, looking out within, say, a year to 16 months. We'll start those clinical trials. So we're moving straight along in the pharmaceutical drug development side. On the consumer health and wellness side, which is really where BayMedica has a very strong presence, as mentioned, they have launched CBC as a B2B business. So BayMedica doesn't have its own brands. You won't see something on the shelf that says BayMedica on it. They provide raw materials, bulk raw materials to other people, who then take it and put it into their creams, or they put it into their gummy bears, or wherever they're going to use it, and ultimately market that product. So that's they're a little bit in the background there, which is a very good place to be, but it's a very attractive business and with very high margins. And as mentioned, they're poised to launch several new cannabinoids going forward. Shane, maybe you could talk a little bit about your patent library.
Sure. Yeah, I think, at BayMedica, we've obviously everything we're doing, and I think I would, InMed similarly has a focus on protecting its, intellectual property or the new inventions. But we certainly have spent time both looking at existing intellectual property in the sector and patenting inventions that we've made in the area of synthetic biology and semi-synthetic manufacture or production of both natural cannabinoids as well as analogs. We do on the analog front, we do have a growing library of these analogs that we've been making, and again, we believe those are patentable. I think as a combined entity, and Eric, correct me if it says it right here actually, but we've got 12 patent families across both organizations. So coming together, a much more robust patent portfolio that includes 7 patent families that are targeting the manufacturing side of things or synthetic pathways, and 5 patents primarily on the InMed side that are covering specific products and formulations. I think it's important to note that both companies retain all commercial rights to the IP that they have developed. That covers off on IntegraSyn on the InMed side, as well as all of the applications on the BayMedica side of things. Eric mentioned earlier that when it comes to what are called major cannabinoids, those that most people have heard of, THC and CBD, they're relatively easy to extract from the plant. Some people in the hemp CBD or kind of plant-based space take those as starting materials and ultimately try to do chemical conversions or things like that to further modify those. But as you move into the rarer and rarer cannabinoids, it probably becomes more and more important to broaden one's horizon and start to think about synthetic biology, chemistry in a much more robust capacity to actually be able to manufacture this variety of cannabinoids. At BayMedica, again, we've already launched CBC, which is a rare cannabinoid. And we are in the process of scale up, and we're still kind of pre-launch, but should see some of these come to fruition in the coming, again, months and quarters, of some other very high margin, high value cannabinoids: CBDV, THCV, CBN, CBT, and there's a whole array of these. We've probably made over 20 naturally occurring rare cannabinoids at this point in time, obviously all at various stages of the development process.
Just would additionally point out that even though these are synthetically made, so made in a commercial setting without touching the plant, they are bioidentical to what the plant actually makes. So there's no difference between what you could take out of the plant and the structure of these compounds. So they're made to be bioidentical to what you find in nature.
I think that's a great point, and that's certainly been an emphasis of ours for quite some time. And really, at the end of the day, our view is a compound, so it doesn't really matter where it comes from. And we see examples of that already throughout the health and wellness and pharmaceutical sectors. A lot of things that were first identified in nature are actually made now via synthetic processes. For example, aspirin.
Right.
Obviously, the space we play in is a large, it's a meaningful market today, but it's expected to grow just exponentially. This applies specifically to the synthetic side of cannabinoids, biosynthesis and chemical synthesis. But I think broadly speaking, the overall industry as a whole, the hemp CBD market as well, is expected to just grow exponentially. This is one analyst projection suggesting that by 2040, this will grow into a $115 billion opportunity. So, substantial year-over-year growth projected. We're excited to be a part of it and think we can play a substantial role in it, both again on the B2B health and wellness sector, as well as the pharmaceutical component of this, especially collaborating with InMed on the latter. Our lead product, I've already mentioned, is CBC. We are a global leader in large batch supply of CBC. I think it's important to note that CBC is not intoxicating. It is not scheduled by the DEA. We are, again, we're manufacturing this at food grade GMP. Eric talked earlier about that. And, I'll just comment, I mean, it's, in some cases, the products actually can be very similar between food grade and pharma grade. And the biggest difference is the number of clipboards involved in the process, and just checking every single box, making sure that nothing has changed from a documentation perspective, a quality control perspective on the pharma, and that does, as Eric said, increase the cost by 5x. But here, on our B2B sales, the markets wouldn't support that in the consumer health and wellness sector. So we do things to food grade standards, which is fairly typical. Again, currently at 200 kilo batches, and historical sales of 2.5 million, growing nicely quarter over quarter.
So as you mentioned earlier, it's really a great combination of two executive teams that have extensive experience in all things biotech, pharma, and manufacturing. So most people are familiar with our team. We have individuals who have extensive pharmaceutical drug development experience, all the way from discovery through clinical trials to regulatory approval and commercialization. And on the BayMedica side, we've got extensive know-how that dates all the way back to the foundation of the biotech industry. Shane, maybe you could talk a little bit about your team.
Yeah, absolutely. So just briefly on myself, undergraduate degree in neuroscience, went to Stanford Medical School, never practiced medicine, ultimately spent most of my career in strategic planning, became interested in cannabinoids about 9 years ago when I credit cannabis with saving the life of my neighbor's eldest son. Did some work actually with a plant touching entity back then, and it became apparent to me that, especially again with these rare cannabinoids, there had to be better ways to go about this, and ultimately partnered with my two co-founders, doctors Chuck Marlowe and Phil Barr, both PhD organic chemists. They actually met each other at Chiron, the pioneering Bay Area biotech company, back in the late 1980s. Chuck is a very gifted synthetic chemist, and Phil, despite the chemistry pedigree, is one of the pioneers in the realm of synthetic biology. He was one of the people behind Novulen, Novartis's insulin made in yeast, was primary editor of the first book ever on commercial yeast engineering. So just a strong background there. We're also very fortunate to have on our senior team Dr. Jim Keeley, who is well regarded in the world of synthetic biology, and has worked at companies such as Amyris and Entrexon, and also Chris Meyering, another PhD who has overseen all of our scale up and commercialization activities, working with our third-party manufacturers and R&D partners. So just really solid, strong team, and I'm blessed to be able to work with them on a daily basis.
So just to give everyone a quick financial snapshot, you can see here our last reported results from March 31st. We're slated to release our year end, which is June 30th, our year end financials in the coming week or so. But basically we have a good cash position. The figure shown there excludes a net $11 million in proceeds from a private placement that we conducted in early July. But this just gives you an idea as to kind of where the company is from a cash standpoint. And the deal that we've reached with BayMedica is an all-share transaction. There's no cash involved. So we're very excited to see this thing through to fruition and get busy building a bigger, stronger company. Combined short-term milestones on the manufacturing side. We want to not only drive the revenues for CBC, but also continue to improve its manufacturing efficiency and increase the margins there. As Shane mentioned, BayMedica is slated to launch several new cannabinoids into the B2B consumer packaged goods sector. And there's going to be a strong focus on integrating our manufacturing teams and technical know-how to really help prioritize what the next projects are. On the drug development side, I mentioned that we are entering a phase 2 trial for our skin cream in epidermolysis bullosa in Europe. We are conducting the IND-enabling toxicology studies that will allow us to enter human clinical trials with our glaucoma product, 088. And we'll be working with the team at BayMedica to sift through their library of cannabinoid analogs in order to find more potential therapies that we can develop through the pharmaceutical process. So overall, no secret what we're trying to do here. We want to accelerate the revenue growth in the short and medium term to augment what we think we could do in the longer term with the pharmaceutical side. We want to advance drug development, not only with our current CBN-based products, but also with additional rare cannabinoids to treat other diseases. We want to expand our pharmaceutical opportunities, looking at these cannabinoid analogs for therapeutic drug development. And overall, we definitely think that there's a tremendous opportunity here to enhance long-term shareholder value and continue to build this company to be the go-to company for all things rare cannabinoids. So I'll stop there and we can go into the Q&A.
Thanks, everyone. We will now move into the Q&A section. We have a number of questions that have been coming through, and we'll be running through these. I might try and combine a couple of them just to save on time. And we had a number of questions prior to this, so there's a lot to cover. As a reminder, if you want to submit a question, please do via the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom application. I'll be reading out the questions aloud and then handing the line over to the team to address the question. Our first question, if I can direct this to you, Shane, can you dig a bit deeper into the market opportunity within consumer health and wellness? What is your niche within here, as CPG is quite broad, and what do you expect to see in terms of expansion into other markets?
Sure. I mean, if we have a niche right now, it's really piggybacking onto the opportunity, what people think of as the quote unquote hemp CBD market. So obviously, most people are familiar. There are a lot of CBD products out there right now in the market, and we've really kind of piggybacked on that. Our focus has been on B2B sales, so really primarily to distributors and white label manufacturers in that sector. Allowing them to kind of leverage what we bring to the table to integrate into products. In terms of where I see this going, and those products could be anything from cosmetics to tinctures to, as Eric mentioned earlier, a gummy. We sell an ingredient effectively, and what people do with it is depends on kind of their target market and the opportunity they're going after. In terms of where I see this going, I think we're still at the very early stages for the entire cannabinoid opportunity. We had obviously a war on drugs that persisted for a long period of time. It led to a paucity of research, so we're still at the early stages of understanding understanding the endocannabinoid system in our bodies, understanding what these different cannabinoids can do, and therefore what are the best applications for these cannabinoids, whether it's in a over-the-counter product in the health and wellness sector, whether it's as a full-fledged pharmaceutical. We obviously already have examples of both. And so I think what we're really going to see is a maturation of the entire industry, and that's going to cover off on, moving into more mainstream CPG companies as opposed to these smaller mom and pop brands. I think you're going to start to see bigger and bigger companies begin to play ball. And that also goes to, for them to play ball, they need things like a very robust supply chain. And that is where I see things like the types of manufacturing processes that we bring to the table as being differentiated in a very positive manner, not just the rare cannabinoids, but it's a highly repeatable, scalable process. Whereas, a hemp plant, you get the wrong storm coming in, or it was the farm next door where they sprayed pesticides, you can have some issues. And so that's where I see some real opportunity for growth is moving mainstream and just the entire maturation of the industry.
Thanks, Shane. And we've got our next question again, which I'll probably direct to you. Are most of BayMedica's customers recurring or one-off? Will the recurring customers remain given the acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, so for context, I think it's important. I mentioned the quote unquote hemp CBD market. I think it's important to understand for context that, again, it's a lot of smaller companies. It's very dynamic. Over the past 18 months with COVID, the statistics are, I believe, that about 1/3 of all CBD brands have actually gone under. So, it's definitely an early stage industry that's going through its lumps and consolidation and all of that. With that said, yes, the vast majority of our sales are to repeat customers as opposed to one-off customers. I would say in excess of 95% of our sales are repeat sales. I don't expect those customers to necessarily go anywhere in terms of buying from us unless, again, they happen to be a casualty going forward or something like that. So there are a certain amount of unpredictability, but as a general rule, yes, we have repeat customers.
Okay, thanks, Shane. Next question, again, probably directed at you, Shane. What will your sales infrastructure look like now that you've got a commercial product, and will you be scaling up?
Well, I think right now this is the sales infrastructure right here, so it looks kind of like me, and I don't think anybody wants to scale me up. No, but all joking aside, look, we have a very small team. We haven't really had a sales infrastructure. I've worn a number of hats. Sales is one of them. Chris Myring on my team, has also played a very important role in the sales and marketing aspect. But that is an area where, especially as we launch additional products, it is going to be crucial, I think, to develop a real sales infrastructure. So that is on the table. We haven't made any firm plans, but that's something that, first we got to get this deal closed and then look forward to working with Eric and Chris and Bruce to, put in place a proper sales team and move, kind of really take advantage of the opportunity that we have before us.
Okay, thanks, Shane. There's a question on clinical programs. Eric, if I could direct this to you. How will the acquisition impact your clinical programs? Is everything still on track with your EB and glaucoma programs?
Yeah, so it has zero impact on our current clinical game plan. So we're proceeding as planned and as discussed with the EB clinical trial, which is a phase 2 trial. And we are, ramping up to initiate a trial in the glaucoma space. So that's still going to take some time. I think where it's really going to have an impact is as we look downstream to finding more opportunities utilizing the library of cannabinoid analogs that BayMedica has patented, and finding these, patent protected molecules, finding their specific uses in treating disease. I think that leads to a very strong opportunity for business development with other pharmaceutical companies who may be looking at this class of compounds, but they prefer to use patented molecules rather than the naturally occurring ones, which you can't patent. I mean, you can patent the uses of them, but you can't patent the underlying molecules. So I think that's really going to be where the big difference is post-merger.
Okay, thanks. Shane, how does the 2.5 million in revenues compare to competitors in your space? And I'll tie in another question. Who is your number one competitor?
So, relative, look, on the one hand, we really probably have the best data for the, kind of hemp derived cannabinoids and CBD and other compounds in that sector, and relative to sales of some companies in that space that are more established, our sales are very low, but I think ultimately that highlights the opportunity, especially as we learn more and more about these rare cannabinoids, where the approach we have has certain distinct advantages. In terms of our direct competition, i.e. other companies that don't touch the plant and are employing biosynthesis, chemical synthesis, or what have you, targeting, I think, predominantly here when it's about revenue, the health and wellness sector, there is no data really available. There are one or two companies that are public, but so we know a little bit more about them, but there isn't any good data out there. That said, most of our competition is just now beginning to commercialize or is even pre-revenue completely. absolutely haven't yet launched. So I would say our 2.5 million probably looks pretty good relative to most of the competition. In terms of who is our number one competitor, I don't think I would, number one competitor is misinformation, honestly. When people think synthetic cannabinoids, they think K2 spice, all these things that don't resemble a cannabinoid molecule at all. I think there are a number of companies out there in the space, though, that I respect, whether it be a hemp-derived company doing things the right way, or whether it be, some of our competition in the biosynthesis space, et cetera, who are, themselves have very smart people and good programs. And that would include, Willow, Demetrix, Creo, Amyris. So there are a number of good companies out there. And but again, I think from a revenue perspective, we probably are leaders when it comes to the direct competition. And, we look forward to, launching additional products. And ultimately, I think this is a space where it's big enough that it can handle multiple suppliers, if you will, to the market. I would also comment that, again, to the one size doesn't fit all in terms of manufacturing. We, I think, especially combined with InMed, are going to bring a ton to the table. But there are going to be certain areas where somebody else's technology may have an advantage for a specific compound. But anyhow, yeah, big opportunity, space for a bunch of people.
Maybe I can just jump. Maybe I just jump in and add to that. So, because Shane's mentioned a couple of times about 2.5 million, and it's a single-digit million figure. But from our perspective, from when we looked at BayMedica, what we saw was a company in its early stages of commercialization, yet its initial product was achieving very high growth rates. So while still low, it basically confirmed for us our long-held belief that there's a large market opportunity here. And with BayMedica, to use a Canadian term, there's going to be multiple shots on goal here with their pipeline. So that was part of the reason why we were excited to have the two companies come together.
Thanks, Bruce. I think this is one for the floor. Is there an international opportunity here? Anyone, either of you could answer that, Eric, Shane?
Yeah, so from a pharmaceutical perspective, absolutely. I mean, as you develop a product in the pharma space, you look towards the global market, not any one in particular. From a manufacturing standpoint and supplier in the B2B space, absolutely, especially when you look at Europe, which is taking a much more scientific approach to the products that are being launched there. A lot of fundamental research, even in the health and wellness space, a lot of fundamental research is taking place. And the standards to which people are being held are higher. So that falls right into our sweet spot. We certainly have to do our homework and learn more about the market opportunities there. But I think there's absolutely international opportunities. Shane, how do you see things?
Yeah, look, I think agree that there's absolutely an opportunity there. I think when one thinks international, you have to imagine that the regulatory frameworks and even import-export considerations can get to be pretty daunting. Just trying to understand all of the rules of the road, so to speak. So that today is something that we need to learn more about. We need to but it's an area of distinct opportunity. I would also note that since we employ third-party manufacturing partners to manufacture under GMP conditions, that if we need to, if it's difficult, for instance, to import for whatever reason, but it could be manufactured locally, we can always look at opportunities to transfer the technology and manufacture in another jurisdiction around the globe. In terms of existing, we have had some existing sales, either direct or indirect, to some other companies that and very limited in nature, but I know that our CBC has gone in small quantities to Canada, the Netherlands, Colombia, South America. Kind of funny to be exporting to a place like Colombia with the reputation around marijuana, but anyhow, and also Japan, actually. So we've kind of hit a number of places already, and but small opportunities thus far, and hopefully we can grow those. Okay,
thank you, Eric. I mean, I think this acquisition is incredibly good news for both companies, and we can, you're setting out the opportunity. There were some folk that were disappointed in the market reaction. Can you give us your reaction, your thoughts on this, and do you have a game plan in place to get things back on track?
Sure. Increasing our presence from an investor relations standpoint has been a goal of ours for this year. And we have hired Colin Clancy, who's come in and just done a bang up job to kind of, relaunch our identity and our tactics, excuse me, of addressing the investor community. So starting from ground zero, we have a game plan in place to increase outreach and tell the story to a broader audience. We think we have a very exciting and compelling story and investment opportunity, and we want people to know about this on a much larger scale. Secondly, we're unfortunate that we're actually making the announcement for the acquisition in a time when the cannabis sector stocks are being hit very hard. And unfortunately, because we are cannabis adjacent, we tend to follow that same path. So I wouldn't say that, anything that we've done or said in the last couple of weeks has been interpreted negatively, actually the opposite. But rather, I just read a big article in the national newspaper yesterday about how hard the cannabis sector stocks are suffering. I'm not an investor in the cannabis sector, oddly enough. I'm a much more of a pharmaceutical guy, but we're going to unfortunately continue to track along with what's going on with those stocks. So I think it's just bad timing from that perspective. But I think the investment opportunity remains, and it's up to us to go out now and execute on the game plan that we're putting in place and to really drive the revenue side of things with new product launches. And we're very excited about that because as Shane mentioned, we are just barely even scratching the surface. They've done remarkable work for a company that's so small and somewhat under-resourced. They've gotten this thing from 0 to 1, which is the most difficult step. Now we're going to go from 1 to 10. And that's actually easier than what Shane's been through in the last couple of years. So they've demonstrated an ability to do exactly what they say they're going to do. They've come up with great manufacturing techniques that are very low cost. And our intention is to be the leader in the cannabinoids that we launch. We're not coming into this looking for a silver medal. We're going for the gold. And we will be focusing on those cannabinoids where we think there's a tremendous upside, significant margins, and a manufacturing technique that's going to position us to be the leader.
Okay, thank you, Eric. There's a number of questions around production, and maybe I'll break them down, but I think you can give it a response as a sort of comprehensive response. The first is if you could give a comparison between InMed's IntegraSyn and BayMedica's cannabinoid synthesis technologies in terms of purity, cost, grams, and market targets, and the potential and timelines towards a full operational run. There was also a question about are there ways to integrate certain aspects of BayMedica and InMed's different manufacturing processes in order to better refine them or make them more efficient? I.e., can you work off each other to run the processes? So those cost questions and efficiency questions, I think you could probably tackle together. And then finally, in terms of scaling up, just how much capital do you think you're going to require?
Well, I'll start with the capital one. We don't actually own the bricks and mortar and the machines to do this, which we think is a big advantage. A lot of people have, a $50 million facility that has one process. Maybe it's chemical synthesis, maybe it's biosynthesis, but they're trying to do everything with just that one process. And as we mentioned, it's probably not the best approach. We have the flexibility to go to different companies that have manufacturing capacity around the world. There's a lot of excess capacity, so that's not an issue. We can always find someone to make our products for us. But we just don't think it's wise for us to be investing our capital in bricks and mortar to be manufacturing these things ourselves. About the different processes. So, InMed has a lot of experience in E. coli biosynthesis, so bacterial biosynthesis. What we're doing is IntegraSyn basically starts with a biosynthesis process, but we don't make a cannabinoid, which takes a lot of steps and takes a lot of energy away from the microbes. What we do is we make a single enzyme, And that enzyme can then be taken and put into a quasi-chemical synthesis process. And it could be manipulated, do a number of different things for making different cannabinoids. So IntegraSyn kind of integrates the two. I think BayMedica's specialty is in chemical synthesis itself and biosynthesis itself using yeast. So we kind of fit in between the two of those. And again, we have now the flexibility to say which cannabinoid do we want to make, how much of it do we want to make, and what quality do we want to make it at. And now we have these three different approaches that enable us to select the best one to meet those criteria. So integrating the teams is going to be really important. We've focused during our due diligence primarily on what BayMedica's capabilities are. They don't really understand a lot about what we can do with IntegraSyn. So that's going to be one of our first projects, is to integrate the teams and get them talking with each other about what we know, what we've learned, the secrets that we have, the things that they can do, and finding the best path forward so that we can use, like I said, any number of these manufacturing techniques to be the cost leader in the field.
And
that's great.
Maybe add to that and just say, very briefly that, there are definitely opportunities, agnostic of the potential synergies, which I think there are, especially as we really bring these teams together post-close. I think agnostic of that, even just within each platform, I can guarantee you there are already myriad opportunities to continue to refine, I think is the word you used, the process and increase efficiency. And we've already done that with our CBC production, where, we've gone from our first commercial batch of 10 kilos to now 200 kilo batch sizes, and our cost of goods has gone down over that time, both through scale as well as improved process efficiency. Our cost of goods has gone down by fourfold. So, that's, and we've been able to translate that into the market and lower the cost of the product we sell, and therefore sell more volume, which
Yeah.
kind of, anyhow.
Excellent. Shane, I think we've got time maybe for two more questions. So the patent protection, I guess, is important. What is your patent strategy for cannabinoid analogs, Shane?
We primarily right now have one patent application covering cannabinoid analogs. It covers both a method of manufacturing as well as an array of novel analogs. The opportunities really going forward to create a stronger portfolio, or to begin to, and some of this has already actually started with some compounds that we transferred to InMed under a research collaboration that was started last fall, but is to develop basically assay these analogs, develop additional preclinical data, in terms of where they bind, on any unexpected results, and then you begin to patent those. So you can really, if you find a compound of interest, you just do more and more work, and you create a stronger and stronger patent position. So it's kind of a tried and true approach out there in the biopharma world on that side.
Okay, and I think we're running out of time, so let me just wrap up with one final question. Again, Shane, if I could direct that to you. What did you choose? Why did you choose CBC as your first commercial cannabinoid, and what do you think the next big commercial opportunities are in the space?
Yeah, so we chose CBC. I would say that we have three primary reasons. One, the science led us there. Two, as I mentioned earlier, the regulatory framework around CBC, when we analyzed it, was quite friendly. And three, the commercial opportunity. I mean, we could have in theory gone after another cannabinoid that may, but if you just look at what's happened with CBD pricing, 5 years ago, CBD was probably up at, $30,000-$40,000 a kilo. A couple of years ago, it was $5,000 a kilo. Now it's under $500 a kilo. So going head to head with something that you can that the plant makes very efficiently didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we wanted to focus our efforts on something with a more robust commercial opportunity, where for us, even at small scale, we would actually be able to sell it at a profit, not be chasing something and saying, well, if we get to this scale, we'll catch up, and be able to make money as opposed to lose money. So that's basically why CBC. I think our playbook going forward is is at some level to mirror that. And we've got, the next couple of compounds that are, probably of the greatest interest to us to launch, CBDV and THCV. I should mention that THCV is also not intoxicating, despite the monikers TH and C in the label. So, but those compounds are also extremely high value right now. Right now, they're both at about that $40,000 per kilo price point. And we anticipate using the same playbook we've used for CBC, come in, be able to be a market leader in terms of pricing and drive volume.
Thank you very much, Eric, Deshane, Bruce. Thank you very much for that. That is all we have time for today. Thank you, everyone, for submitting these questions, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join the call. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to InMed directly. The email address and telephone numbers are listed in the presentation and on every InMed press release, and we'll be happy to speak to anyone with additional queries. Thanks again, everyone. And with that, we will sign off.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks, everyone.